Hey, everybody. First of all, thanks for popping in. And I see that we already have a question there um, from Casey Wood. What is the best way to get the certification roadmap by Microsoft? There are so many associate level role-based certs, but very few expert-based certs. We would like to see more expert-based certs. Okay. Interesting. Now, first of all, I am not with Microsoft. I am still a Microsoft certified trainer, but I don't have any pull, sadly, in the direction that Microsoft goes with that certification. Yeah, in terms of Azure, the only two expert level certs that they've got right now are the what the well, obviously the architect expert, and I guess the DevOps expert, engineer expert, which is kind of odd to me that that was expert level when some of the other things weren't. I would expect them to, because they're really pushing hard on the data front, to probably have either data science or artificial intelligence expert level coming up, but also from a certification standpoint. They are pushing a lot towards Dynamics 365. They seem to be putting a lot of their effort there, which I don't, frankly, necessarily agree with. But yeah, and honestly, as far as the most meaningful certs, I think with the cloud right now, at least on the Azure side, I mean, it's relatively straightforward. I mean, really, there's sort of two. The Azure admin and the Azure architect. The DevOps is interesting, but I'm not sure how many DevOps folks are tied tightly to Microsoft DevOps. Particularly, frankly, I think I would have a hard time, frankly, recommending the Microsoft DevOps right now because Microsoft is, also has GitHub, and they're putting a lot of things into GitHub, and a lot of people are starting to question why they would go Azure DevOps rather than GitHub. So anyways, then not really much of an answer other than I do share your frustration a little bit, and I know a lot of folks are less than thrilled that Microsoft is pretty much seems to be, I don't know that this will continue to be the case, but they seem to be kind of letting, I don't want to say abandoning, that might be a little too strong of a word, but maybe letting the on-premises certifications die on the vine. So, yeah, a little bit of flux there. I'm not 100% sure where that's going to come out. So, question. It's a good question there. How does Azure compare to other cloud providers from a technical and engineering point of view? So here's what I would say, and this is a little bit anecdotal on my part. I mean, first of all, there will be diminishing differences between AWS and Azure. AWS is still ahead in terms of they've been doing it longer than Azure has, quite simply. Although that is, less an issue now than it was, say, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, there was an absolute clear engineering advantage to AWS. And I think a lot of it, which one is better, frankly, comes down to which one someone's using. And oftentimes what their overall opinion of Microsoft is, quite frankly. Having dealt with both, there are absolutely things that AWS does. I think that it would be nice to see Azure do, and frankly, there's things the other direction as well. I was watching this week how AWS handles authorization and the ability to kind of have others authorize as well. And I will say that I'm glad I'm in the Azure environment, because while there were lots and lots of options on the AWS side. It was just far more straightforward on the Azure side. So again, I'm kind of 2 for 2 and not actually answering questions. But I think what you'll find, is that they're both going to do really very similar things. I think what you want to look at, there's 2 metrics that are going to be important for you. I'll throw a third one in as kind of maybe a distant third. Cost for whatever you're doing. Both have pretty straightforward cost estimators, and I'd go and look. I know Azure better. They've got a cost calculator. And you can really just kind of figure out, okay, this is what's going to cost me on a monthly basis, and if there's significant differences. I would also look at any kind of, compliance. Sorry, it's Friday. If there are regulations that you are subject to, make sure that the platform is supporting compliance and helping you with compliance towards that. I think both will do that. And then I would say the third thing to look at would be, and this ties into cost a little bit, but would be their service level agreements, things like availability and performance. Although for both of those, there's so many options for both systems that you could probably put together a pretty equal system. So there we go. That's, like I said, 2 for 2. Speaking a long time, not answering the question, but questions are pretty much it's a toss up. All right. Now that was Alejandro's question. This one from Carlos. I'm preparing the Azure Architect certifications, and I have a voucher for AZ300 and AZ301 exams. At the same time, I know Microsoft will shortly replace these exams. What happens if I only pass before they change both exams? If I only pass AZ300? So here's what you want to do. And I will look this up once I get through, the initial cut of these questions. But there's going to be at least a 90-day, and I'll look at their COVID documentation to see if they've extended that. I think it might actually be extended out through the end of the year. But they are going to have a coexistence of the sets of certification. So AZ301 and 300 and 301 will continue to be valid while once 303 and 304 come out of beta, because they're both in beta right now. And that's supposed to be for 90 days, although it may be longer. But the simple answer is, if you're going to take the 300, you want to make sure you pass both before they go out of commission. Because once they're gone, there are no there's no coordination between them. In other words, so if you pass the 300 and didn't pass the 301, you'd have to go and take both the 303 and the 304. All right. As a newbie to cloud, where do I start? And scripting is must to start. And can this help me machine learning? Okay. And then kind of, I would say almost an extension of that. Well, I'll do that one first. So where you really want to start is a cloud fundamentals. And this is something that, as we are internally defining kind of hybrid cloud concepts and how we want to proceed with those, the challenge is, on the one hand, there are a lot of similarities across different platforms, right? A virtual machine is a virtual machine is a virtual machine. And whether you call it a virtual machine or an EC2 or whatever, Google, which I'm truly not familiar with, or I actually was playing around with Oracle's cloud, it's all kind of the same thing, right? And once it's up and running, you connect to it, okay. But also there are, really kind of fundamental differences in the way you interact with the resources that you're creating. So, my recommendation really, even though we want to be as cloud agnostic as we possibly can, is I feel like when you're starting, you kind of want to start down one of the paths. My recommendation, not surprisingly, would be to start down Azure. I think it's a little bit, frankly, easier to pick up, but in the end, that's kind of yours. But I would say, we've got fundamentals ourselves. We've got Azure Fundamentals, which is out and soon to be updated, which I know is another question there. So there we go. Now, can this help me in machine learning? So what I'll say to that is that the cloud in general can absolutely help you with machine learning. But machine learning is something that is in and of itself completely separate from the cloud. Now, so in other words, I wouldn't say, okay, if you go and you learn Azure, then you're going to be a data scientist with machine learning. If, however, you are already familiar with the concepts of machine learning and the algorithms that are used, then the cloud, whether it's Azure or AWS or Google Cloud or others, is going to be a fantastic platform for you to potentially play with and to use that knowledge and to develop the knowledge. So the direct knowledge of the cloud is not going to directly help you with machine learning, but knowing the cloud at least could give you a framework where, rather than having to worry about millions of dollars worth of equipment that you would need to do machine learning on your own, for much less, you can you can spin up what you need in the cloud. I will also say, and this is one that I honestly haven't taken enough of a look at, but I am somewhat skeptical of. It's skeptical, again, is probably a strong term. So with the newest iteration of some of Azure Analytics, there is a fair bit that is automated, and it's designed to make performing machine learning much easier. And Microsoft is very big on the concept of democratizing technology. Conceptually, I think it's a great concept. I also do think with machine learning, though, that I think you're never going to be able to get great resorts out of machine learning unless you really, again, are familiar with kind of the underlying concepts. It's fun stuff. All right, so start with the fundamentals. I'd recommend starting with the fundamentals within one of the clouds. My personal recommendation would be Azure. And then, again, as far as machine learning, it'll work as a sandbox for kind of learning machine learning, but it in and of itself isn't going to do that. All right, comparing Azure to Google Platform Cloud, if I do one, does it help me with the other cloud cert? Again, that's kind of the same concept I was just talking about, that it will absolutely help you. It will be easier to get a certification in one cloud vendor if you've already gone through and understand the concepts of cloud from another, is the easiest way to do that. Okay. So there we go. So now we're down to the anonymous question, which actually I saw did come across on the chat. So Casey, I realize the answer might be slightly self-serving, but with so many different training providers for cloud like INE, A Cloud, Linux Academy, Udemy, CPT, and Nuggets, among many others, how do learners determine if the content is not only continually up to date, but has enough info to actually pass the related certification test? Yeah, the simple answer to that is you go to INE, and then it's all great. I mean, honestly, that's a really valid question, and the problem is that that's a question I can tell you what we are doing. Okay, I am, responsible for the Azure content for INE. And I am committed to making sure that that content stays as up to date as possible. And in fact, for example, were the pandemic not to have happened, we would have, by the end of March, come out with content ahead of time for the updated exams for Azure Architect and Azure Admin. Okay, so all 3 exams, we've updated the content to match that. And, you know, a lot of the content hasn't changed. So we're obviously just not going to change content if we don't have to. But we are committed to staying in front of that. Also, just kind of along the same lines, the Azure Fundamentals course is updating in about a week or 2. And unfortunately, we're not going to have all the updates, which turns out to only be about 3 or 4 videos that need to be updated. But we are, frankly, staying ahead of that. And quite honestly, look, I would fully expect, the other competitors to be doing the same thing. And I think, what you want to look for is, is there a way to preview whoever's presenting the content? Because I know for me personally, how well a trainer is engaging me, particularly for a video content, is going to have a massive impact on how much I absorb of that. And I definitely try to be engaging, but I also honestly understand that, different people learn different ways. So I know we have content, we have some from a lot of different courses. We've got some, little 2-minute videos that are up on YouTube. If you go to our YouTube channel, INE's YouTube channel, and you can kind of preview it there. I think you can also, probably find that for most of the vendors. And so I would expect all of the vendors to be keeping their content up to date. If vendors say they have content that is, designed to help you get certified, then honestly, I would expect them to do that. You do have my commitment, as long as I have the ability to do so, that we are going to continue to look at content and try to make sure we do everything we can to keep it up. And I'm not trying to hedge on that, but the reality is we fully expected, we had planned on getting all this content done prior to the end of March. And then, circumstances we didn't expect. And I literally, finally, we got our remote kit together. I finally got the content done for the rest of the Azure Architect that, is aligned to the 203 or 303 and 304. Again, just the last thing I'll say as far as our company, when I came on board, I did let them know that I expect, probably somewhere between 20 and 25% of our content have to be refreshed every year for cloud, because that's just how cloud works. And again, everybody knows that. I will say that, I'm not going to name any names, but I do know there are some vendors that don't keep up, but I would expect most to. All right, I am being long-winded today, and it's a Friday. You wouldn't think that. Great question, though. Next question, does it matter which order the AZ 300, 301 exams are taken? No. That's a simple one. What I will tell you is that you will find it's when you prep for one, you're in large part, not fully, but in large part, you're prepping for the other. I tend to, for the 300 and 301, and really the same is true for the 303, 304. I think I prep for them in order. It just kind of worked out for me that way, but no, there's doesn't matter what order you take them, as long as you pass them both. Do remember with the 300 and 301, you have to get those taken before they go and are retired. All right. Oh, this looks like maybe a tech one. Hi, Tracy. We're currently preparing a web-based application for e-commerce sector, which is going to be based on Azure. I wonder what our criteria for choosing between Azure Functions, Standard and App Plan, and containerization, maybe plus app service, and which are more commonly used based on your experience. They're all outstanding questions. That is an outstanding technical question. Congratulations, Kakber? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry if I'm not. First technical question of the afternoon. So I love function apps. Okay, I love function apps because you can, with function apps, define them such that you're really optimizing your costs, right? Because you're paying for them on a consumption basis. And when it comes down to it, that is really the advantage of the function app. And if you get the function app, the one of the knocks on function apps is that first call to a function app has a lot of latency because the function app has to load. But if you get a premium function app, then you don't have to worry about that. Now, the downside to function apps is not so much function apps, but it's generally architectural. And it's the downside and the upside, and that is microservices, right? There's a ton of advantages to microservices, but also if you've ever tried to build an actual application that is based fully on microservices, you're going from, on the one hand, you can update little pieces really easily. On the other hand, you're going from, a unified code base to hundreds of code bases that you have to have an absolutely strong CI/CD and DevOps environment, frankly, in order to have any hope of that being successful. So I think from that standpoint, it's not so much whether or not an Azure function is better. I think they have a lot of advantages. Again, the thing you have to understand is to use them effectively, you're really going to be defining a microservice architecture, which may or may not be consistent with your environment. Now, containerization. I think it's safe to say, as I'm racking my brain here to see if I can contradict this, but I would say it is safe to say that I cannot say a bad thing about containerization. I am a massive fan of containerization. I think it Microsoft, two moves. I'm a Microsoft guy. I just am. Two moves that they've made that I think are extremely strong. The embracing of containerization several years ago, and the development of .NET Core, which is going to be whatever the next version. It's all going to be unified, but I still think of it as .NET Core because I can now, build and I can drop whatever I build into a container, all from say Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, and then deploy it however I want. I love the flexibility, the deployment flexibility. When you're talking about containerization, and when you look and say, okay, well, yeah, you've got deployment, but what about scalability? The answer to that is simple. The answer is Kubernetes, right? So if you're looking at a containerized solution, and I know you said maybe an app service, I would recommend if you've got containerization expertise or knowledge base on premises, I'm guessing you probably are at least familiar with Kubernetes. Take a look on the Azure side at Azure Kubernetes Service, because you can get a high degree of scalability and also a high degree of control. If you don't need the control, if it's really absolutely just going to be a web app, I would consider using a web app to host containers. I will tell you though, I have never actually tried to scale that. So conceptually that will scale. But I think from a scalability standpoint, if you're containerizing, my recommendation that I feel really comfortable with would be Kubernetes. Well, already, I have to say I'm going to I owe our digital marketing person a you told me so, because I really thought I'd come in here to 2 hours of dead air, and I've already had a great set of questions. I'm going to look up real quick, see what the current status is with 300 and 301, because I just didn't remember off the top of my head. I'll keep an eye out for questions, but I will also come back in just a moment or two with hopefully a more definitive answer to that one.